Welcome to the Illuminati broadcast. I'm your Messiah, David Moore. Your King David. What's up? Let's see. Yeah. I'm your Buddha. I'm your Antichrist. I'm your Messiah. I'm all of the above. Alright, so let's just talk a little bit about something real quick. Let's see. Today's a really good day. Have my AA commitment, go in the morning, open up the AA Alcoholics Anonymous, and then lead or be the director. No, the secretary. Yeah. Yeah. So that's pretty cool, right? So I have a couple topics on my mind, but I just want to go over some research I did yesterday. So we have this idea right here in Yu-Gi-Oh. You see Yugi use 3 revealing light swords, 3 swords, right? So right here we have a Duke, right? A Garrus, so that's 1 sword because air represents spades and swords. And then you don't have one right here. This is Thoth, which is a prince, and Thoth and Visago are the prince. They're one and the same. And then you have Samigena, which is a Marquise, which is a moon sign. So then you go right here and you have another Duke, Valifor, and that's another sword. And then you have Barbatos, and that's another sword. So you have those 3 swords, which represent the 3 crosses that, Jesus was crucified on. I think an important topic today I want to go over is about hell, like what is hell and what's its primary function and purpose. So if you get revenge, you plan on sending the person to hell, right? Because they harmed you. And you're like, okay, when they go to hell, they're going to suffer for all eternity. There's no escape from it, and they're going to get tortured. When we think that there's a separation between God and the devil, you're basically saying, I don't believe that God is the devil. So you're basically saying that you don't believe in something, right? Because you believe in the devil and God are separate, and you believe that the devil does these bad things. So you kind of believe like, oh, there's some kind of power stronger than God that can influence me to do evil. No, you're doing evil on your own. When God does evil, when I do evil as God, I am God, right? So you're not God, I'm God. So when I do evil, it's righteous. But when you do evil, it is unrighteous. And you go to hell, I don't go to hell. And you're like, well, that's a double standard, right? No, because I'm allowed to do that. You're not. And the reason why is like, when you have a king, they're allowed to rule, right? So you're not allowed to rule. So there can't be 2 kings, right? So how are you allowed to be a king and I'm not allowed to be a king? Like, that doesn't make sense. So yeah, let's just go over this real quick. So you have those 3 swords, that 3 crucifixion idea. So that lets you know in Egyptian mythology, and these are also the books too in the Bible. This one's Ruth. Barbatos is Ruth. Valifor is the Walls of Jericho. I forgot what part of the book that is. Joshua. And then you have right here a Garrus, which is Exodus. So you have those 3 angels. The Jews want to be like, well, we need Moses to be here for you to be the Messiah. I'm like, well, I'm Moses then. Okay, well, you need to do this. You need to build the 3rd temple. Well, like, yeah, I'm already here. They're going to be like, well, you need to allow the Jews to perform rituals and be the king. Yeah, I'm already doing that. That's what I do. I do rituals all the time. So I'm already doing everything that you think that needs to be done for a Jewish Messiah. So it's like, all right. And then they just come up with excuses. That's a huge part of the story, okay? Excuses is how a human will stay alive and deny that I'm their God, right? So if they're always denying that I'm their God, they live and they live and they live no matter what. That's why you're like, how come I do all these good things and I get punished, but then the minute that the bad guy does something bad, he doesn't get punished? Because he has an excuse, right? And if you have an excuse for everything, you always win. So when you go to hell and you're at Judgment Day, you're like, no, God, I'm not going to go to hell because I did this. No, God, I'm not going to go to hell because I did this. No, God, I'm not going to go. And God's just like, okay, keep going. Please exhaust all your resources. And then finally, what I noticed is when people were like, it's all about admitting defeat. So in Alcoholics Anonymous, the first step is admitting defeat. You're like, all right, God, you win. You win. Please change my life. Do whatever it takes. That's the admitting, right? You're just like, all right, God, you win. There is something stronger than me out there. Because we will live our lives for so long denying God, right? Because we'll be like, no, 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 no. But then once you take the chance to admit defeat, it makes a huge difference. And I think that's very important, you know? So when I'm out there doing my thing, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm God, I'm the Messiah. Do you believe me, yes or no? And they'll be like, no, and this is why I don't believe you're the Messiah. I'm just like, okay, let them exhaust their excuses, their resources, because there's gonna come a moment when they're just like, you are God. The moment that they admit that, they end up either dying or they end up living. If they live, then it's like they have this chance to redeem themselves, right? Because it's like, all right, I admit that King David is the Messiah. David Moore is the Messiah. Okay, he's the king, he's God in human form. So I have to be able to worship him, right? But once they're like, okay, I don't admit it, I don't want to admit it, I don't want to believe it, it's this, you're holding yourself back from that judgment. But then when you're like, okay, I believe it, you're God. But then they get struck because they don't really believe it. But they finally let down their excuses, which is very interesting how that works usually. Because you're letting down your wall, right? And it's good to do that. Like, it's good to admit. Like, I'll be like, okay, there's this singer named Brendan. I believe that he is in the Illuminati. Or I could be like, well, maybe he's not in the Illuminati. So you're always going back and forth between like, is it true? Is it not true? Is it true? Is it not true? But you usually get your answer, right? Like, why would you wait for so long if you knew the Messiah was real? So let's see, there's this rabbi named Rabbi Tovia Singer or something, and he has a lot of excuses. He's really good at that. So that's that Jewish thing, right? That I have an excuse, I have an excuse, I have an excuse. And you can see that in the Book of the Dead with the Egyptians, right? So this is the scale, the baboon sitting up here. You have Horus over here, and Anubis weighing your heart out. And you're explaining yourself with your feather. You're like, I did this, I did that, I did this, I did that. And then your heart's like, But the heart, it initially belongs to me, right? Because if I'm God, then I know your heart better than you do. So then how can you say you know me better than I know myself? So when Rabbi Tovia Singer's like, I don't think Jesus was the ram that is the ram god from Egypt, then he's wrong, like, ultimately, because we have to remember all the gods are the same. All the gods around the world are one God, me, right? So I'm all those gods, and why would you separate that? Why would you deny that truth? And why would you say that your Jewish God is different from the Christian God? They're the same thing. So that Jesus God is the same as that Jewish God. And I know it's all about holding traditions and values, but it's like, what's the excuse? Why are you holding back? I think that's why people get mad at that Jewish idea of, okay, well, they're Jews and they don't believe in Jesus. So they basically are denying him constantly. Like, nope, he's not the Messiah, he's not the Messiah. But once they do admit it, they usually become Christians, right? And then they're like, oh, dang. So it's just this repetition. But now we have this conundrum, right? Well, it's not Jesus anymore, it's David. It's King David now. So then the Jews are right in a sense where they're like, what? We told you it was King David. We told you it was David Moore, the Messiah, right? But we don't believe he's the Messiah either, because if we did, we would be following him right now. We would be worshiping him, but they're not worshiping me. So then that lets you know that they're liars too, right? And they have an excuse for everything because that's what they do. That's what the function of the Illuminati is. It's to keep denying God of his power. So it's like, well, how strong are you really? How strong is your magic really? How strong are your prayers? Like, are you better than our God? And I'm like, your God, I'm your God, so of course I'm strong. But then they're saying, are you stronger than me? And I'm like, oh, okay, am I stronger than you? Am I stronger than your belief? And it's like, let's see, I don't think it's about being stronger. It's something else. It's about being more honest, right? So they'll keep living their life pretending that they have this faith in a higher power. But then when it comes down to it and they're offered an opportunity to follow their higher power, do they really take it? No. Because if they did, we would live in a different world. And a lot of people say like that this world is like corrupt and evil, and yeah, sure it is, but there's also a good part to it, that where we can live here and be happy. But how are we going to be happy if we don't have faith in a higher power? So when you meet your Messiah, you're going to be like, well, I want to be happy in this world, so I'm going to follow you, right? But if you're like, no, I don't believe you're the Messiah, so I can't follow you, because if I do, then my world won't be happy. Then that lets you know that person isn't really a true believer at all in their own God, in themselves, and in other people. Yeah, so that's just a quick little story that we're learning, right? Because air represents like admitting, because we need air. You can't live in this world without air. So that's one way to admit, right? To start admitting the truth is like, air is important. Speaking is important. Learning is important. That's what air represents. It's that cycle, that circulation, that it's a gift of life, really, because it feels good to breathe. Imagine if you lived in a world where you didn't breathe. Like, you wouldn't feel good. You wouldn't be happy. You wouldn't experience life. So when you go to hell, maybe you don't breathe. Maybe it's always like this place where you can't experience that joy of life, because hell is designed as a place for punishment, right? And it's not just a punishment for a little time, it's punishment forever. So I think once people realize that their destiny is in hell, that they just kind of think like, oh, I'm just going to blame the devil, right? Instead of myself. So when you go to heaven and you meet God, you don't blame the devil for everything bad that has happened. You blame yourself, and you take responsibility. And in a sense, if God is like, well, I did it, then you say, okay, thank you, God, you did it. Like, you just agree with God. That's it, period. You just have to agree with him. Because if you try to refuse him, then it's futile, right? Because you say God is stronger. And like the Jews will be like, or the Christians as well, they'll say like, well, God is omnipotent, he's the most powerful thing in the whole universe, blah, blah, blah. So then why do you challenge him? Because they're not really true believers. So then they'll say it's the devil. And then they'll say like, well, that's my God, this is your God. No, it's always going to be one God, right? So even in Egyptian mythology, they make that clear, that all those gods are all just one part of God. They're all parts of one God. So that's why you have Saturn in the center. And I think we're figuring this out a little bit more better, right? How this wheel or this chart works. And how King Solomon did it, right? Because if King Solomon was using these Egyptian spirits to build a Jewish temple, how is that wrong? Like, how is that a bad thing? And people like to blame King Solomon, like, he had all these wives. You mean he had all these different ways of showing his love for God? So the Jews are really lost in that sense, because they're just believing one thing, where they're just like, God told us this is how it's done, and we don't believe any other way. But then when the Messiah comes, you don't even believe that either. So then you're not really real Jews, right? And that's a debate that the Catholics have, right? So they're just like, well, these Jews aren't real Jews. And they're right. Because if they were real Jews, they would be following me, right? And I'm not going to go out there and save them. What's the purpose? You think you're cute little lambs that I want to shepherd? No, you're evil, ugly humans that do bad things. You can do bad things. So there's 7 sins, right? So if I was to give them a sin, it would be sloth, because they're just like lazy. They're like, we'll let God do all the work. We'll let him do all the work, and we won't do any of it with him. We won't do it for him. We won't worship him. And they'll be like, yeah, we do. We follow all the rules. Yeah, but following the rules and worshiping God are different. When you worship God, you're like admitting defeat, and you're admitting the truth. So you're saying, okay, King David's the Messiah, right? And then when I come out and you're like, well, you're not that King David. I'll be like, wait a minute. Yeah, I am. I'm an O'Neill. Like, I'm Lu, L-U-G-H, the Norse god, the winner, right? Like the victorious one. So how am I not your God? And then they'll be like, well, there's this. So once they have those excuses, that lets you know, oh, they're the enemy. They're the ones that go to hell. And you think, well, so does God choose who goes to heaven and who goes to hell? Yes. And does God already preordain this? Yes. Does God give people a chance? Yes. Does God make up his mind and it's final? Yes. That's exactly how it works. So I'm just giving you a little bit of knowledge because, not all of you grew up with parents. I grew up with a mom that's Catholic, but she's also very loving, and she allowed us to grow up in the Christian faith and in the Mormon faith and the Buddhist faith. She let us pick and choose what we wanted in our life. She let us decide our higher power. She let us decide what we want to do when we grow up, how we want to be happy. She gave us a lot of options and free will. And at the end of the day, we always prayed to God. We prayed before breakfast, we prayed before lunch, we prayed before dinner, we prayed before dessert, and we prayed at bed. Like, we were always praying because we were being thankful that we have a mom that feeds us and takes care of us and watches us and doesn't abandon us. We prayed for each other. We prayed for the fact that we have brothers and sisters that we could live together. And a lot of people, what are they really praying for? What are they really grateful for? What do they see? And we have like Jesus on a cross suffering, right? And we would be praying to that because we're saying God, Jesus went through a lot of pain to give us this moment of peace and joy in our life. He gave us a moment to be grateful for him. That's what this is, right? This is that cross. And the reason why you have that cross with Saturn is letting you know Mars is about death, right? And war. So God went through that death and that war to become that king, that hope and that savior for us. And when I was younger, a lot of people would be like, well, if you're the Messiah, why didn't you come out when you were younger? I'm like, I think I wanted to just give myself a chance to live a normal life, right? I think we all do. But also, like, I like to do the right thing. And sometimes you're not ready to do the right thing. Sometimes you're not ready to be somebody. And then sometimes you do take up the mantle and then you have to figure it out on your own. And I enjoyed the process. There's nothing I regret because I have a wonderful niece. I have another niece. I have another niece. I have another niece. I have a nephew. I have a nephew. I have a nephew. Like, that just lets me know, like, all that pain that I went through created those beautiful things. The beautiful human beings, like beautiful angels, like spirits that are just so wonderful and glorious. Like, I would go through it all over again just to know that they could exist in this world with me like that, But now I want something better for them. So I'm like, all right, I have to cast my shell away. I have to cast away the fact that I don't want to be God. I have to cast that away. And I have to accept my responsibility because I want better for them, right? So I choose them over you guys. So instead of letting you live in this world where you don't have a God, I'm gonna let you live in a world where you do have a God. And if you do live in that world, then our job is to make sure it's clean, right? So we have to fight this idea that God doesn't exist, or we have to fight this idea that God is in heaven. No, he's here with us. I'm your God, so I'm living with you, right? So then you have to admit that. I remember one time in Washington, D.C., there was this girl, we're in a homeless shelter, and she was like, I know you're God, I know you're real. And she just kept answering my prayers. I'm like, I need a shampoo. I didn't tell nobody, and she brought me shampoo. I needed this, I needed that, and she brought it to me. I didn't ask, I didn't pray for it. I just knew in my head, like, I needed these things, and she would give them to me. And she would follow me, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but you can't follow me because you're homeless and poor. Like, there's nothing you could do to help me to save this world. All you can do is what's right for yourself, and you need to focus on yourself and help yourself, right? Because I have to focus on saving myself. But let's say you are a rabbi and you know the scripture very well. Well, then your job would be to align yourself with me. Would you want to be on the winning team with me, or do you want to be on the losing team with yourself and all the other non-believers, right? And you don't have to change your religion. You just have to have a leader, right? A Messiah. You just have to have a king. So whether you're king as in I am Jewish, I am Christian, I am Catholic, I am Mormon, I'm all of those religions. I love it. And that's why people say, well, that's what the Antichrist would do. Okay, well, I'm gonna do that. Because that's how it works. They called Jesus the Antichrist, right? Because they were like, well, he's only gonna bring war and destruction upon us and pain. And it's like, yeah, because you're the bad guy. So there's no excuse. And if there is an excuse, they're gonna use it because it's gonna keep them alive. It's gonna help them keep living in this veil, this world that doesn't exist. But it's our job to lift that veil, to keep removing the veil and being like, nope, it's time to see the truth. You might get hurt for it, you might get punished for it, you might get banished for it. But that's why we have to work as a team, right? And you have to have a leader, and when you work in a team, you can't just be your own leader. So if I'm your leader, then we work together to make sure that nothing bad happens to you, and nothing bad happens to me, and nothing bad happens to the people that follow us. So then we create a bigger movement, right? And that's what a lot of rabbis do. They bring in all the other Jews together. A lot of Christian priests bring all the other preachers together. A lot of Catholic priests bring all the other people together. I think there was a comment about, God and Jesus, and to think that God and Jesus are separate is a folly, because you're saying that God doesn't really have feelings, or that he can't exist in the human realm. And a lot of Jews will say that. They'll be like, well, we're waiting for Moses. We're waiting for this person. We're waiting for that. And it's like, why do you need all that if you have God? Right? So if you have God in human form already, living on this world 2026 with you, then you have to be able to work in a certain sense where you are choosing the truth, right? And you're like, well, he is Moses, right? Because this is what this represents, right? To explain Genesis and the Bible and the Torah. This is the Torah, okay? Because this is the ephod plate that they would wear on their chest. This is the tabernacle. This is Jewish. It's Egyptian. It's Christian. It's everything, okay? It's the key of Solomon. That's what it's created for. This is their foundation, the Jewish foundation. This is a 365-day cycle. Where are we? Right here in Aquarius, because we're in February. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Today's the 17th, right? I wish I could double check, but yeah, we're 17th. If you go all the way, it'll hit 31 right here. And then you have your next month, right? Which is going to be March. This is Pisces. You keep counting. It's a calendar. It's a compass. It's an interpretation device to help you understand things, because, usually religions are oral practices, and they can be written down. And that's what Egyptians would do. They would write things down, and they would put in their own ideas as well. Like, let's see, if this is... who would this be? Osiris, right? This is actually, so when you're using the Goetia, number 7, so 2, 4, 6, 8, right? So 7 and 8 are on this one. So that would be Amon, and that would be Barbatos. So when you look at Amun-Ra, which is the Egyptian god, this would be him right here. But this is kind of this growth cycle of one God. So God creates the earth, the heavens, whatever, Genesis. Then he goes into Exodus. And then he goes into the next chapters of the Bible. And so on and so on. And then he ends up here. I think this would be Ruth, right? Chapter 8 is Ruth. And that's when God brings in the Moabites. And that's Barbatos. And they would be known as barbarians, right? And then so Ruth is with a Jew, and then they create the line of King David. And then once they have the line of King David, that starts a lineage succession. And so how does that make sense if this is Amun-Ra, but yet it is also a Jewish story as well? So they're not separate. They're the same thing, just told a little differently so it can be explained but still passed down. So that was their responsibility, to be able to give a lot of options for God to choose what he wanted to see in this world, to give him the opportunity to experience it with us. And a lot of Jewish people don't like that. They don't like that there's this mixture. There's the Abramelin, which is this story about a Jewish person that's a mystic, and he meets an Egyptian, and the Egyptian teaches him a lot of magic, and then they find out it's the same thing, and then they combine the religion, and it's not necessarily a combination. It's because it was already combined. They just separated it so it can be spread out, because you can't memorize all this right away. So you'd have to have an easy way to carry it with you. Like when you're homeless, you don't want to carry so much because you're just gonna break down. But if you find a way to carry all of it in the right way, you can sometimes survive that way, but it's not the best thing in the world. So you're not supposed to carry all that baggage with you. But here we have something that's simple, that's easy to understand, and can help you translate through different various methods. And it's passed down. This is not just something that somebody thought and was like, this is how it works. No, they wrote it down, they studied it, they practiced it, they passed it to the next person, and so on and so on and so on. And that's kind of what this pharaoh idea is, right? This lineage of this pharaoh and this king. That's why they say Moses was the same pharaoh from in ancient Egyptian mythologies, or not even mythologies, real facts. Anyways, so we have Baal and Agaris. So we have this first part of God, right? The Genesis and the Exodus. And then we have Thoth and Anubis, and they're over here judging the heart and the mind. So it lets you know that God has a consciousness, because we're created in his image, right? So everything that God can do, we can do as well, but only through him. So when you're creating all these excuses, you're saying that God's not real. But then finally, when you're like, all right, God's real, and he's everything, then you either live or die. Because if you live, then you really believe that God is real. But if you die, then it's like you never believed and you will never believe. And that's why you go to hell, because you're going to suffer there for all eternity. There's no going back from that place. You could think of hell as the sunlight, right? So the sun needs that firing, burning furnace to be able to keep us warm and to keep us alive. And a Jewish person might be like, well, God created light before he created the sun. And that's okay, because you do notice that when the sun's rising, you notice the light first before you notice the sun, and then you see the sun. So maybe that light that's always moving, it creates the sun, right? So it holds the sun in place, that light, and it's always moving around us. And it's God's presence, right? It's a part of God because God created it, so it's a part of him. Yeah, and then there's parts of the Bible where they say that there's not going to be a sun anymore, and it's just going to be light and all the time. And that's beautiful too, but we don't need to always be that way. So like when the Jews left Egypt, they built a golden calf, right? To be like, God, live in this, be in this, because they wanted to skip all of the world just to end in Revelations, because they wanted to live in his world already. But God was like, no, we got a lot of work to do to get there, so I can have a human form, right? So then they built him a little ark. They put God in there, the tablets, and they're like, okay, now you're happy. Because Moses is represented by the bull. He grows horns when he comes down from the mountain. So that's astrology. That's Egyptian mythology, Hathor, right? So then how are you Jews different from anyone else? They'll be like, well, we're chosen. No, you're not chosen, because you're not the same Jews that God created first, his first Jews, which would be my family lineage, right? So my family are real Jews. You guys are just factions all the way down here. And how can you be up here with us if you're not part of our crew? Like you're from you're in a different set. You're the ones that are going to go to hell because you don't want to believe that this one is the right one, right? So you don't want to believe this is the Messiah. You want to believe there's a different one. That's worshiping false idols, right? So if you're worshiping false idols like celebrities, like, yeah, sure, it's good to listen to the music. You know why? Because you created that song. You created that music. We created that because we suffered. We went through that to create that noise. And then the false idol will take all of that, put it together, and create a beautiful song for us, right? So we can listen to the song and worship them, and we give them our money, our attention, and our power, and we choose them as our Messiah, right? We choose them as our gods. And then we just keep worshiping and worshiping them. And you know what? that's very interesting topic that maybe we could discuss a little bit. But this video is ending because it's 30 minutes. I'll upload it and we'll talk about that in a few, okay? Thank you, bye.